DK Engineering is a world-famous Ferrari specialist and dealer. David, alongside his son James, have built the wonderland for car enthusiasts in a simple little farm that would conquer the world of the supercars. This is DK Engineering. DK Engineering was founded in 1977 and takes its name from the initials of the Christian names of David and Kate Cottingham, the husband and wife team who formed the company. From an inspiring point of view, three fellows from Brazil found themselves on a mission to bring this type of elegance and commitment to their clients' most valuable assets. GTO today reflects the experience of more than 10 years that we have selling, buying and importing high-end cars. This is GTO Car Special.
Bom, hoje é um dia muito especial aqui na GTO. Pela primeira vez, a gente tem aqui no nosso showroom James e o David Cottingham, da DK Engineering. Eles estão nos visitando da Inglaterra. O James está aqui para correr esse final de semana de McLaren, nas 6 horas de São Paulo. E a gente vai ter um bate-papo aqui com ele sobre o nosso mercado, o mercado de lá, supercarros, hipercarros, carros colecionáveis. Então, agora, indo para o inglês, James, really nice to have you here at the showroom. David, nice to have you here as well. This is a very special day for us. And we're just going to have a chat about DK Engineering, how you guys started, what the market is like nowadays for you, and if you have any questions about Brazil as well. So it's non-scripted. We don't have any specific questions. I just wanted to know more about you guys and enjoy your stay here in Brazil. So first of all, should I start with David?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Perfect. David, how did it all start? When was it? How did you end up in this business of selling cars and restoring the most special cars in the world?
It really started through motor racing. I started racing when I was 21, and I actually worked in the research laboratories at the old Kodak company as a physicist. But every night I was in the garage building race cars, fixing other people's cars so I could afford to race my cars. And then come 1977, my wife and I decided it was time to start a full-time business instead of a business where the money was under the mattress, as we used to say in those days. In fact, it was. And we decided, whilst I'd been racing Jaguars a lot in those early years, I had a lightweight, one of the works lightweight E-types, 49 FXN in 1969. And whilst I was really keen on Jaguars, I decided Ferrari is the thing to follow because there was a good market for old race Ferraris. Nobody was mending broken Ferraris, and I thought I would do that. So come 77, that's what we established the business to do in the main. But as the years went by, I was always buying and selling great cars. My passion's the 50s, the 60s sports racing Ferraris. And so that was really what the business was about initially. But as the years went by, I always wanted to keep up with the times, very much as James does now. When a new Ferrari came out, I made sure we got our hands on one, so we knew about it. I made sure I got the documentation, I knew how to mend them, I knew what they were all about. And now I'm left behind with the modern stuff, but James is absolutely on top of the late cars. And if it was me still, we'd have been out of business by now because the market has changed so.
I see. Perfect. And James, when did it all start for you? Did you have any options apart from not being a petrol head since you were already born within this this context?
I convinced myself that I would do something different. Both my brothers, who are 9 and 11 years older than me, went into the family business pretty early on. And as a schoolboy and a university student, I thought to myself, well, I'll go and do something else. But ultimately, always wanted to be involved in cars and eventually come back to the family business. So I studied mechanical engineering at university. I was intent on going into motorsport, maybe working for one of the world sports car teams, or maybe even Formula One. But university taught me that actually engineering is quite boring. And so as I finished university, I thought I'd like to get more into the sales side of things, because I'd worked during my gap here at DK. During my university years, you're typically at university for 25 to 30 weeks a year. So I'd have 20 weeks plus in the family business still. And I'd realized that sales was quite exciting. And I think from a racing driver's point of view, and I always had a bit of a need for speed, the thrill that you get from a deal is so it ramps up so quickly, and it's such a buzz that it's quite like going fast on track. And, I felt that was the way that our business should go. If we were going to grow it, we should really grow the sales side of the business first, because we had great foundations, having had all these wonderful cars around us for, the first 25 years of the business, and having a really strong name and reputation in the Ferrari world. If you go on the websites for the histories of the early cars and look at them, you'll always see DK or mum and dad's names next to these great cars. So that's the direction I wanted to go. And when I left university, we moved our family business to the farm that you visited, the Little Green Street Farm. So it was my job to oversee the renovation, because it was kind of my idea and it was my vision. And mum and dad were really good about it. They saw it and they wanted to do it, but they were busy running the business. They said, well, we've bought this farm now, it's your responsibility. We need to move in within 6 months, because that was the deal we had to move from our old premises. In order to pay for the new premises, we had to be out within 6 months. So I had a big task on my hands, and having just finished university, I felt like I had the skill set, and I learned quite quickly how to manage builders, which is always a difficult challenge. And then post that, I was determined to go and do something else. But because we had the 2008 credit crunch and the way the economy and the market went, I actually ended up having to stay in the family business because I had no other choice. A, because I wouldn't have been able to get a job, and B, because we had quite a lot of problems as a result of that situation and having just moved our business. And I've never really looked back, but I'm lucky that I learned, the real art of the trade during a really difficult time, and I never forget that. And so, it wasn't easy at the start. It was very, very hard. And then as we've built the business, you learn lessons, you remember lessons that you learned 10 years ago, and you just keep going. So yeah, to answer your question, I always thought I'd do something else, but I didn't. And I've been lucky enough to become, now managing director of this fantastic business that we've grown as a family. And I can see, us growing further in the years to come. But if you'd said to me 15 years ago that today we'd have over 500 cars in our care at any one time, I couldn't have imagined that was possible with the space we had back then. But even now we're full. So, we are still looking to grow going forwards and maintain that relationship that we have with our client base.
And how do you see DK Engineering in the future? Not only DK, but this whole market that you operate in.
I think one of the reasons that we have been lucky enough to be as successful as we've been in recent years is that we have not pegged ourselves on 50s and 60s Ferraris only. That was definitely the basis of a great business. But then moving into all ages of Ferrari, and not only Ferrari, the guys that collect and buy those special cars that we sell, they also buy McLaren F1s and Pagani Zondas, the cars we've been talking about today, and CLK GTRs, the reason we met in the first place, which we can come on to. So you have to specialize in all things blue chip. And then with that speciality comes service, storage, restoration, even racing, and DK, whilst we're famous for being Ferrari specialists, and that's really what we do, it's not all we do. And we make sure that we can look after a client, especially in this day and age where the values we're talking about are so much higher than they were 10 years ago. These guys have less time. They have a lot more responsibilities outside of the cars. And so they want someone that they can come to and lean on for the complete service. And that's very much become our thing, is the complete service. We make sure that we can look after a client's every need.
So yeah, you've mentioned the CLK GTR. That's the car that we had in Brazil a few years ago. I've met James 8 years ago.
That's right.
That's correct, 2016.
Yeah.
It was your first time here in Brazil.
Yeah.
And you were here to buy a Mercedes CLK GTR, which ended up not happening. But that's how we met. I've been to DK many times before and after that as well. What would be the first thing that caught your attention in the Brazilian market? What's something that you find curious or different compared to the UK?
Well, I mean, looking at the 50s and 60s Ferraris again, there were some fantastic cars in Brazil over the years, and there still are.
Yes.
Only a couple, but
Yes.
there are still some fantastic cars. And the same with Venezuela. As a company, we've pulled 4 or 5 really important Ferraris out of Venezuela. And in Argentina, there have also been some great cars. So there have been great cars from the early days in South America. And back in 2015, 16, when we came to see you, you know, the thought of the fact that there was a CLK GTR race car, which, you know, GT1 cars were growing in popularity at the time, and it was still a massively valuable car, but not as valuable as it is today, it just sounded unbelievable, you know, and it was a real adventure. And when people say to me, have you ever been to South America? Before today, the only time I've been to South America is to come and see you for 2 days to try and buy a CLK GTR, which I tell people, and people are like, sorry, what? A CLK GTR race car was in Brazil. What was it doing there? I mean, the whole story is unbelievable. And I think not many people actually know to this day that car was here for all those years. And even though we didn't buy it, it was a huge adventure coming here to come and look at that car, look at the collection you took us to, which was just blew my mind, that in Sao Paulo, with everything that's around you, that there were all those hundreds of cars and such variety and quite a few special things. But obviously the centerpiece, although it was sitting sort of on the ground floor because it couldn't go anywhere else under a cover, was this CLK GTR race car. You know, it's a great story, and these stories make your career. You know, these are the things that you tell people about that are interesting. And it would have been amazing if we could have bought the car and hauled it out. But we've been lucky. We've had a number of other significant cars from South America over the years, and the CLK is the one that got away. But actually, having said that, because I didn't buy the CLK GTR, I did buy my 550 Pro Drive that I still have today. And that's been a great adventure on its own, you know, racing that around the world and owning it and telling people and growing the sort of the knowledge of that model and that particular racing car. But yeah, you know, the CLK GTR, when I see that car every year when we go to Pebble Beach, because it's always at the track, and I always think it's the one that got away. But the story that goes with us trying to get it was still great. And it was a great experience coming to Brazil and sort of experiencing a collection of that size, and then coming back here today to see, you know, your setup here and what you've built since then is amazing to see. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. In our market here in Brazil, mileage is very sensitive for these special cars, sports cars, hypercars. People think that in general, if it's over 5,000, 10,000 miles, then it's done and it's not going to work and it's not as desirable anymore. What do you think of that?
I think it's changed for us a lot. Only 5 years ago, our market was quite similar. A higher mileage car was almost impossible to sell. Even F40, you know, if you had a 50,000 kilometer F40, it was just near impossible to sell. Same with a 355 or a 360 Challenge Stradale. As soon as they got to 20,000 kilometers plus, it was like too high mileage to sell. But I think Instagram has made cars much more appealing, much more desirable, because Instagram is an app that pretty much everyone has on their smartphone. And you need to post pictures of things, and cars photograph really well. They're interesting, they're bright colors, they're great design. It's, you know, something that appeals to all men and lots of women as well. And as a result of that, that has helped us, you know, grow the appreciation of these cars and the use. And I think today, whenever I advertise a car that's really low mileage, if you look at the comments, a lot of people say, such a shame this car hasn't been used. So the mentality has changed. Personally, I don't agree with them. I think, you know, it's great to have some low mileage cars, it's great to have some medium mileage cars, and it's great to have high mileage cars. But I think the point is that people like to use their cars much more. You know, cars and coffee, again, 10 years ago, it didn't really exist as a thing. Now, Saturday morning is all about where are you going to go in your car to use it, to enjoy it, whatever the weather, and where are you going to go and meet people to chat, you know, rubbish about cars, talk rubbish about cars. So, yeah, I think it's become less of a thing, and almost in the opposite direction. You know, a lot of people are anti-low mileage, but there's always the guy that didn't have the opportunity to buy a car new, and they want a car to be as close to perfect and as new as possible. And, you know, on the flip side, when the 50s and 60s Ferraris were 20 years old, we were restoring them for the first time as a business because they needed it. They weren't that well built and they corroded from new. Whereas today, you look at a 288 GTO that's 40 years old, it's very rare that you need to restore a 288 GTO. We are restoring them, but that's to make them absolutely spot on perfect. But they're still a pretty good car to start with. You know, you don't find basket case restoration projects anymore. And that's why the mileage thing has changed, I think, because you can use cars and they still survive, and as long as they're well maintained, it doesn't matter.
Perfect. I want to ask you about your typical customer, if you can define as one stereotype of customers. I imagine you sell these cars worldwide. You have all sorts of buyers from everywhere. What's the most typical customer they have nowadays? Is it the overseas guy who's only looking to invest? Is it the guy that's actually going to use the car? What's the profile these days?
I'd say for DK, our typical client is overseas, but leaving their car in the UK. And I think the UK, we have a very strong resale market. We've got a very strong overseas owner store location market, and that's due to the rules around taxing and registration of cars in the UK is very relaxed and very easy. Yes, a lot of people talk about Brexit, but you can take a UK registered car into Europe for 6 months of the year and then bring it back and store it with us. And so we have a lot of clients from the Far East, from Asia, from America, from South America, who leave the cars with us. And they know that when they come to collect the car, and whether we deliver it to them at the airport or we deliver it to them somewhere in Europe for their 2-week holiday, that the car will be absolutely on the button, ready to go. And that might have been us having organised the service or having serviced it in our own workshops, having transported it with our own trucks or using our trusted partners to do that process. So, I think it's our typical client is looking for that one-stop solution. They can pick the phone up to me and say, right, I'm coming in 4 weeks and I want the 812 Competizione Aperta and my F40 ready, and I want them delivered to Monaco, and we're going to drive them to Austria, and I want you to collect them 2 weeks later. And also, whilst you're at it, can you prepare that car for London because I'm going to be there for 2 days? That's the sort of thing that we do, and my typical client is leaning on me for the complete service, knowing that I will give them the right advice in every single department. And I think that's what's really interesting about our business, having been founded by my parents who are sort of enthusiasts, owners. We've always owned our own cars, and it started from Dad having his own small collection of very important cars, that we also, here I am in Brazil racing in the World Endurance Championship. It's been my dream to do Le Mans, managed to do it this year. I feel so lucky to have done that. But, our family, we've always owned cars, we've always toured, we've always rallied, we've done concours events, we've raced all over the world, we've done every single race meeting there is. And therefore we can feed back real life experience to people in terms of how we go about ownership and what the best way is. Not only from advice on terms of what to buy and what to sell and how to go about it, but how to maintain, how to use, how to enjoy. And that's really important. And, in 2 weeks' time, we're taking delivery of our own T50, for example. And that journey's been really interesting because we've done it with 5 or 6 clients who at the beginning, all of us weren't necessarily sure, but we had a good idea. So we've just done it together. And now we're all super, super excited about receiving our T50, albeit a little bit late, but that's okay because I think the car's going to be worth it.
Oh, definitely worth the wait. Now, moving over to David, I want to ask you a question. If I'm not mistaken, you have a story back in the day that involves Walt Disney. Am I correct?
Yes. One particular, a long time ago, let me think what year it would have been. A long time ago. When would it have been, James? When did I buy it? When was I restoring the 860 Monza?
Early 80s.
Okay, I was restoring a Ferrari 860 Monza, very important, 1956 sports racing Ferrari, which actually won the manufacturer's championship for Ferrari in 56. And I was restoring the car, and I had the right type of engine, but I didn't have the original engine. I was at Pebble Beach, and it was a special year. Ferrari was the mark that year. And there was a large prancing horse carved in ice. And I was standing by this large prancing horse carved out of ice. And I met this chap called Bruce Lavache. And we got chatting. And Bruce said, what cars do you have? Or I think I said to him, what cars do you have? And he mentioned he got a 250 Tour de France. And then I said, I'd got this 860 Monza. And he kept saying, for the next 10 minutes, well, I'll be darned, well, I'll be darned, well, I'll be darned. And it turned out he had the engine for my 860 Monza. And I'd only just met him, but 2 or 3 days later, he agreed to let me have the engine, and he sent it to England for me, and we became lifelong friends. So some years after that, he was having a divorce, and he wanted to sell this very special 250 Tour de France he had, which originally, it's one of the 13 Louvre cars, 14 Louvre cars. How many 14 Louvre cars were there? Nine 14 Louvre cars. And this particular one had been supplied new to Tony Parabano, who was a Sicilian crook, probably, who the IRS ran out of California. We had a great race team with Ferraris and Maseratis. And he had this very special Tour de France, ray with blue and white stripes over the roof, which, after he was run out of California and went to South America somewhere, never to be seen again, by the way, it was sold at public auction, I think, at that time. And Walt Disney ended up owning the car and used it in the film The Love Bug, where it raced against Herbie, the VW, the white VW with the stripes over the roof as well. And the car was just as it was when Walt Disney owned it, when I bought it. Bruce had had it in storage for 20 or 30 years. So I undertook a total restoration of it and then sold it, as James says, I'm not sure if he's right, but he tells people I sold it to pay his and his brother's school fees. He's probably right, actually. So we sold it to pay the school fees, let's say. And then years later, the car came up for sale again and James bid for it at auction.
Well, no, it was sold to someone else. It came up at auction, was sold, came back to the UK. And then a few years later, a customer of ours wanted to buy it. And so I went and bought it. And then we re-restored and it's lived with us ever since.
Yeah, it's at home now.
So we still have the car lives with us, although it belongs to a customer. Wow. And it's a great story because also when the F12 TDF came out, he did a homage F12 matching spec, which annoyingly he didn't keep. He sold it after a few years, and there's another story there as well why. But yeah, they looked great as a pair at that time anyway. But the TDF's still with us, so.
Wow.
That's one of the many great cars I've owned, restored, had fun with. I raced that car, rallied it before I sold it, won concours with it, awarded Best of Show by Phil Hill one day, which was fantastic for me.
Well, I think it's telling that usually the cars that you do best with are the cars that you keep for a long time. You know, and often as a car dealer, you buy something and someone comes along quickly with a profit and you're like, oh, I need to take that. But actually, when you say, no, I'm going to keep this long term, you generally do better. You know, if we'd kept that car for not 3 years, from 93 to 96, but kept it until 2006, you know, it's a big difference.
Car. And when I said I'd lost the thread, the thing I was going to say was, through the cars, I've made so many great friends. So the chap I mentioned, Bruce Levarchuk, wonderful family friend, but he's one of many people that have become close friends as a result of the great cars.
Wow, that's a great story. Great story. Loved it. What is the cheapest car DK has ever sold? Do you have any idea of what it could be?
The cheapest car, I mean, we've sold, you know, cars for a couple of £1,000s. But I think the cheapest car pro rata to what it's worth today versus how long it's taken to grow in value is a Pagani Zonda for £193,000.
How much?
£193,000.
When? When was that?
2005.
That is a great investment.
Yeah. And that same car is a C12 that was upgraded to S spec early in its life. It was left-hand drive, silver. Fell off a lorry at one point in its life, which was always a bit of a, like, came off the tail lift and fell off, but wasn't badly damaged. Later was restored by the factory. And yeah, that car I've sold a few years ago, maybe 2 years ago for $6 and a bit million, and probably is today an $8 million car because it's a very original C12. But yeah, we sold it for £193,000. I think that's the biggest growth in value of a car today that you'd say, what are like the most valuable cars in the world? And there are, you know, if you're going to build a collection of 10 super valuable cars, I think a Zonda's in there today, which, you know, blows a lot of people's minds, but they are very sought after and quite rare and very special. But yeah, that car was, relative to what other cars were selling for at the time, super cheap. You know, it was less money than an F40 on the day, and it was not an easy sell. You know, I think it was one of those cars. And we took it in part exchange against a McLaren F1 GTR at the time. So we sold an F1 GTR, took an F40, the Pagani, maybe a Carrera GT or something else, I can't remember. So we needed to sell these part exchanges, and it was one of them. And funny enough, we sold it to a hire car company at the time. So for a while, you could go to Scotland and you could hire that Pagani Zonda for a day and go and drive it.
That is unbelievable.
It blows your mind. You know, we're talking not that long ago, 20 years ago. It's quite a long time ago now, actually, but yeah.
But still, it's very, very surreal. And what's the most valuable car you ever sold? You don't have to mention the figures, of course, just the type of car.
Every year, these values move on and on, so it's difficult to remember at the time versus what everything else was worth. But in recent times, we've been involved in transactions for cars that are in the 20s and the 30s million dollars regions regularly. The big value cars, which a 250 TR or the greatest McLaren F1 GTR today, or the 250 GTO, we've not handled one of those in the last few years, and the values have moved on quite a lot. But at this point in time, during a year, we will handle a car in the 20 to 30 or 30 to $40 million range. 2 or 3 transactions a year at that sort of level.
Right. And is there any sort of car that you wish to sell, but you haven't sold one yet? Is there something left for you guys to sell?
Well, me personally, I've not sold a 250 GTO myself. I've been very busy with F1s, very busy with lots of other high-value cars. Sold a pre-war Alfa 8C. Like I said, lots of F1s, CLK GTR Roadsters and coupes. Porsche GT1s, lots of Zondas, especially again in recent years, but never a 250 GTO. But it's one of those cars that I don't really chase because it's, I get a phone call once a week from someone saying, I have on consignment 3 250 GTOs, or I have a customer I've got the mandate to buy one, and it's just, you waste so much time doing it. But every now and again, there is an opportunity. There are a couple of times where I've thought in my head, I think that car might be available and I think that guy should buy it. And I haven't got on with it, and then that actual deal has happened. I've got one really good customer who bought a car that I thought he should buy that car, and 3 months, and I just didn't think again about it because it was just a bit of a pipe dream. And then it actually happened, but it was done by someone else who'd had the same idea, obviously. So you do kick yourself, but you'd end up wasting so much time trying to do GTO deals. And I think also these days, most of the owners, they know each other, so they'll probably do the deal directly. I think I'm better served spending time trying to help people build a collection, and help them with the cars they don't necessarily understand or the people they don't know that own them. But yeah, I'd like to sell a GTO. One day soon, I'm sure.
What about you, David?
I think for me, the ultimate car, the ultimate Ferrari is a 335S, a 1957 full cam 335S Ferrari, which I've never had one in the workshop. I've never worked on a 335S. It's about the only great Ferrari that I haven't worked on, about the only great model I haven't.
But actually, I did bid on the last one that sold at auction for a customer. We weren't the underbidder. We ducked out maybe €5 million before it sold. But I was really, like Dad, I love those cars. I think they're the best looking car. Great period of Ferrari. It's the car that ended the Mille Miglia, unfortunately, because of the accident that Di Portago had, which we all know about because of the Ferrari film that came out last year. But yeah, I did actually bid on that car that sold, it's about 4 or 5 years ago now, but really wanted our client to have that because it would have completed his collection almost. He's missing a 50 sports car, but we ducked out a bit too early. But yeah, that's a good call.
DK is very much associated with Ferrari F40s, right? When you think F40, usually you think about
Hopefully.
DK. Do you have any idea of how many cars you've transacted or worked on during all these years, F40 specifically?
Yeah. So we did a tally a number of years ago, and we were at 200 at the time. We sell 15 to 20 a year, F40s. So we are over 300. It's quite difficult though, because you change your invoicing systems over the years. You change the way your stock book works. You also sell certain cars more than once. So we're talking about individual cars or transactions. But it's definitely over 300, well over 300 transactions now. And, in terms of maintenance of cars, yeah, probably the same number have been through our workshops, because obviously we haven't sold every car that comes through our workshop. In our care at any one time, we've got about 20 cars, 20 F40s at any one time. So when people come to see us, they come through the workshop and they see 4 or 5 and they're like, well, there's a lot of F40s. And then you take them to storage and there's, 15, 16 cars at any one time sitting there. It is quite daunting. But yeah, we love an F40, and it's that car that bridges between new and old so well. I think modern collectors, F40s as old as they go, maybe a 288, and then older collectors, as modern as they go, as the F40. And there's a great background story to the F40 that people don't realise, but it is the car that saved Ferrari. If they hadn't have built that car, I think we wouldn't have Ferrari as a manufacturer. And it was built in secret under Enzo's instruction without Fiat's knowledge. And actually we have produced over the last few years a film about the F40, which is nearly finished, which we'll be releasing within the next couple of years, depending on how we go about it. But it's really interesting. And we managed to interview some really key people, including Nicola Materazzi before he died, to make that documentary. So it's going to be super interesting.
Nice. So in a couple of years, there's a documentary.
It's nearly ready. I've actually got a version of it on my phone that I was supposed to watch on the flight on the way over here yesterday, but I was too tired. But I think we've got one more interview that we need to get done with a couple of people that are long-term owners and someone that's had one from new, and that should complete the documentary. But it's really good. It's really good. It's going to be very interesting. Quite geeky, like our users' guides. You've got to be really into the F40 to want to watch it, but I think it'll be very good.
I'm sure a lot of people will want to watch it.
Yeah.
So this last bit is quick fire questions.
So,
Mansell or Senna? For both of you.
Say Senna. It is Senna. We haven't just got to say Senna. Everybody's got to say Senna. It's Senna.
Perfect. Normally aspirated or turbo?
Normally aspirated, but the F40 somehow does it in a special way that also works. But it's the only turbocharged car that, for me, works with turbos. Everything else normally aspirated.
What about yourself?
Normally aspirated for me. And I like working on a big, normally aspirated engine, whereas I don't like working on a turbo engine.
Nürburgring or Le Mans?
Le Mans.
Easy like that.
Easy.
No questions about it.
Le Mans is no great car is associated with winning the Nürburgring 24 hours. Like, there are so many great cars that are associated with winning the Le Mans 24 hours. The atmosphere is different. I think there's also something very German about the Nürburgring. So, I'm more of a European that likes French and Italian things, And I like Porsches, but I'm a Ferrari guy, and Ferrari's history goes with Le Mans, not the Nürburgring. So, yeah, for sure, Le Mans.
I totally agree. I have raced on the old Nürburgring, and how Sterling Moss and a few other people, including the German lady who died, how they learnt every corner, I do not know. But to me, it was just a crazy fast drive in the country. I just didn't know I just had no idea what corner was coming up.
I think it's difficult to explain, but I think the Nürburgring is much more of an enthusiast's destination because Le Mans is unobtainable, whereas Le Mans is like the pinnacle. If that makes sense, I think a lot more people can access and enjoy the Nürburgring, so it's an enthusiast's favourite place. Whereas if you're dealing in the best cars in the world, or you're fortunate enough to perhaps have that opportunity to go and do the greatest race in the world, then Le Mans is the pinnacle. And for me, it's up there, And like I said, to tick that box this year for me was huge. And we didn't finish, so we've got to go back and have another go next year, I guess.
I'm sure you guys will. And last question. One hypercar, no limit, no budget limit or anything. One hypercar for life. Supercar or hypercar. If you could choose just one to keep it forever.
We're talking of cars in the last couple of decades, are we, really?
Any decade. No age restriction.
It could be the 300 SLR Uhlenhaut if you want.
It's so hard. What a difficult question. Can you ask?
Can we have one each?
One each, yeah.
Then, okay, in that case, I can have the 335S.
335S.
Because that period is such an amazing period. The mid-50s, Ferrari were developing such a rate their sports racing cars and all their cars. And so were Maserati, and so was Alfa Romeo. It was a great period for me.
Right. What about yourself?
I'm going to go for the F1 because I've done so many miles in F40s. So I kind of I've completed that bit. And I just think you could do an F1 is really special. It's got so much going for it. Won Le Mans, which of course is the pinnacle. But I think it's such a good all-round car. It's not the best driver's car in the world. It's quite hard to drive fast, but there's just something so special about them, and then it's that package, it's like 90% across the board everywhere. So I think I'd have an F1.
Perfect. All right, James, David, thank you so much for taking the time to answer these questions, for visiting as well. It's a really, really special day and an honor to have both of you here.
Thank you for making us so welcome to the show.
You're welcome.
as your super showroom.
Perfect. Thank you very much. É isso?
That's it.